America sends its soldiers to war. It does not always know how to welcome them home. James came home in 2009. He's been trying to arrive ever since. The city learned not to see him. Edgar never learned that. This is bound to survive. James was on the bench when the crisis started. A bench in Director Park in Portland, Oregon. He had been sitting there since 6 in the morning. It was now nearly noon. A bus had backfired 2 blocks away. That was all it took. 15 years since Fallujah. His body did not know that. His body was back. His hands pressed flat on the bench. His eyes closed. His breathing wrong. And on the bench beside him, Edgar, the crow who had been coming to this bench for 7 months. Edgar pressed his body against James's arm. He did not make a sound. He stayed still. He stayed. Edgar pressed his body against James's arm. Feathers against the olive jacket. A warm weight against James's arm. Present, solid, there. James felt it. Not immediately, but the warmth registered. Something real. Something here. Not in Fallujah. Here. His breathing began to slow. James had been a staff sergeant in the United States Army, 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. He had brought 17 men home. He had not brought 3. Those 3 were the ones he thought about every day. He had come home to Portland in 2009. He had a sister, an apartment, a job lined up. He had lasted 8 months. The PTSD had not announced itself politely. He had lost the job. Then the apartment. He had been on the streets of Portland for 6 years. He sat on the same bench in Director Park every morning. He liked that he could see the sky from it. In Fallujah, you always watch the sky. Old habits. James had tried the VA 3 times. A 6-month wait. A medication that made him feel underwater. A group session. He had stood up and left. He was not angry at the VA. He was tired. Tired is worse than angry. Tired just sits. Edgar had appeared 7 months ago. James had been eating a granola bar on the bench. The crow had landed on the back of the bench. James had looked at him. He had not chased him away. That was enough for Edgar. James had started saving parts of whatever he ate. For Edgar, he had not done something consistently for another living thing in years. It felt like something. He just did it. Edgar had learned James. He had learned the stillness that meant James was okay. He had learned the different stillness that meant he was not. He had learned what to do about the second kind. This was not the first time. Edgar had done this before. 3 times. It had been Edgar. Every time. The crow who had watched him long enough to know the difference. It was a Thursday in October. James had been on his bench since 6. The morning had been quiet. Edgar was on the bench back, watching the park. At 11:47 a.m., a city bus turned the corner on S.W. Morrison. Its exhaust system backfired. One sharp crack, like a shot. James's hands hit the bench. His body locked. He was not in Portland. He was not in October. He was in a street in Fallujah in 2004. His eyes were open, but not seeing the park. His breathing was shallow and fast. Edgar stepped down from the bench back. He moved to the bench seat beside James. He did not call out, he did not flutter. He was still, deliberately, completely still. A warm weight against James's arm. Present. Solid. There. People walked past, the bench clearing around him. James could not call out. He could not explain. He was somewhere else. James felt it. Not immediately, but the warmth registered. Something real. Something here. His breathing began to slow. He became aware of the bench under his hands. Then the air. Then the sounds of the park. Then Edgar, pressed against his arm. He looked down. Edgar looked up at him. James said, very quietly, "Okay." He said it to himself. He said it to Edgar. He said it to Fallujah. "Okay." Carol had been doing her rounds when she noticed James. She had been about to approach him again. Then she saw Edgar. She stood at the edge of the plaza and watched. She did not approach. She had worked this job for 11 years. She had never seen a crow do what this crow was doing. When James's breathing had fully normalized, Carol approached, not with her usual professional efficiency. Slowly. She sat on the far end of the bench, not beside Edgar and James. At the far end, she said, "I'm Carol. I work security here." James said, "He's not mine." He paused. He said, "He just shows up." They sat on the bench for 40 minutes. Carol and James, Edgar between them, watching the plaza. James found himself talking. He had not talked to anyone for more than a few sentences in a long time. Carol listened. 11 years of security work teaches you most people just need someone to stay still long enough. She stayed still. Edgar stayed still. James kept talking. Carol came back the next morning. She brought 2 coffees. James accepted the coffee. He said thank you 10 minutes later. On the 4th morning, she brought a printed card. It was the address of a veterans peer support program. Not the VA, run by veterans, for veterans. She said, "My brother went." She said nothing else about it. James went on a Thursday. He almost didn't. He stood outside the building for 11 minutes. He went in. She said, "You don't have to say anything. You can just be here." James still sleeps in the shelter on cold nights. He still sits on his bench every morning. Edgar is still there. Some things have not changed. Some things have. Carol still brings coffee on the mornings she works the early shift. They don't always talk. Sometimes they just sit, Edgar between them, watching the plaza. James was asked once what had changed. He said, someone started showing up. He said, a crow started showing up. He said, I don't know why. He said, he just did. He said, maybe it meant I was still worth showing up for. He said, that was the thing. That was what changed. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to Bound to Survive, a new story every week.